Welcome to the news. Today we are going to shortlist world's greatest novels. You may have heard about them. So here we go. Punisher, Born. The origins of the Punisher are rather simple and to the point. After seeing his family get caught in crossfire between rival mafia houses, former Marine Frank Castle dedicates himself to a one-man war against organized crime. That was how the Punisher is born. Or was it? In Punisher, Born, Garth Ennis shows us how the seeds for the Punisher were sown long before that tragic day in New York. Taking us back to Frank's time as a Marine during the Vietnam War, Punisher, Born sees him outgunned, burnt out and facing total obliteration. The Vietnam setting might be familiar to those who read Ennis' flashback scenes in Preacher, but Born uses the senseless war to serve even wilder goals here. The devil might be here, but he's not playing cards this time. You know Frank will make it out of Cambodia alive, of course, but when you consider the costs he has to pay to do so, you'll wonder if that is a good thing. American Flag. Set in a near future where the US government has relocated to Mars and citizens who remain behind are ruled over by self-serving corporation The Plex, Howard Chaykin's American Flag is an acerbic satire of consumerist society, surveillance culture and reality television, decades ahead of its time when it was originally published by fledgling indie publisher First Comics starting in 1983. The star of the show is Reuben Flagg, handsome and incorrigible, but, it turns out, fundamentally principled, formerly famous actor, who turns to a career in law enforcement as a Plexus Ranger after being replaced by a hologram of himself in the top-rating TV show Mark Thrust, Sexuous Ranger. You are being controlled dispatched to Chicago's Plex Mall to replace its fallen deputy. Flagg sets out to make a difference, stirring things up with the locals and stopping a series of subliminal messages that are intended to provoke gang violence. His actions eventually expose the sinister nature of the Plex itself, which naturally incurs the wrath of his employers. Written and drawn by Chaykin, the opening story arc is American Flag at its finest. It was originally published as 4 interrelated 3-part segments over 12 issues. Modern collected editions split this into 2 separate parts, creatively integrating Ken Bruzanak's distinctive lettering and explosive sound effects. Chaykin's gritty, angular art has never looked better, and it tells its story using a wide range of narrative tricks and graphic devices that, mostly, still feel fresh and exciting. The series flagged, pun intended, after the end of its first, freewheeling story arc, and its unique original vision inevitably became diluted when Chaykin relinquished the art duties, with issue 26, and then the writing as well, after number 31. When First Comics folded in 1991, American Flag languished until Dynamite and Image brought out a collected edition in 2008. It's now readily available in trade paperback and well worth reading, not so much as great sci-fi. You can sometimes tell it was being made up on the fly, but as a wildly inventive and entertaining satire skewering targets that, if anything, mean even more today. Batman, The Killing Joke. Alan Moore famously dislikes The Killing Joke, his superb one-shot exploration of the relationship between Batman and arch-nemesis the Joker. Why? He told George Query in The Extraordinary Works of Alan Moore, The Killing Joke is a story about Batman and the Joker. It isn't about anything that you're ever going to encounter in real life. There's no important human information being imparted. He has a point, but, with respect to the Grand Wizard, that misses the importance that these characters have played in readers' lives. Batman and the Joker may not live in the real world, but they exist in our imaginations, and The Killing Joke remains one of the most potent explorations of 2 pop culture icons. It helps, of course, that the mighty Brian Bolland is on art duties and that with this book he casually created some of the most enduring images in comics. One bad day. The premise is simple. A man quits his job to become a stand-up comedian but gets caught up in a robbery. Shortly after, his wife is killed in an accident. Trying to escape pursuing Batman, he stumbles into a chemical plant, where his skin is accidentally bleached white. The combination of disastrous events on this one bad day drives him murderously insane. This origin of the Joker was intended not as canon but as merely one possibility, and it's only a small part of the book's appeal. Instead, this is a brilliant psychological thriller that relies heavily on the relationship between Batman and his nemesis and the, admittedly now well-worn, idea that Batman is only a few degrees less psychopathic than Joker. Moore demonstrates a degree of sympathy for the clown prince of crime, even when he commits one of his most heinous acts. The Killing Joke won the Eisner Award for Best Graphic Album in 1989, and its influence can be felt in both Tim Burton's Batman and The Dark Knight, which also plays with the idea of the Joker as an unreliable narrator. Rich with ambiguity but vividly rendered with Boland's crisp lines, it's a multi-layered masterpiece that proves Moore and Boland make for a truly dynamic duo. X-Men: The Dark Phoenix Saga. Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men is legendary, with complex, even convoluted plots and intense, character-driven, soap opera storylines. The art by John Byrne is some of the most dynamic and memorable in the X-Men's illustrious history. In this famous story, Jean Grey embraces godlike power through the cosmic Phoenix Force, but with tragic consequences. She's manipulated into embracing a villainous persona, the Dark Phoenix, which brings her into conflict with her fellow X-Men and snowballs into committing genocide before she begins fighting to regain herself. There's a running theme of how power corrupts from within and love blinds people to things they just don't want to see. At its core, this is a love story, not just about the love between Jean and Scott but between the X-Men as a group. There's conflict and heartache as they come to realize they can't face bringing their friend and former teammate down. The saga also introduced popular X-Men foes, the Hellfire Club, saw the villainous beginnings of Emma Frost, and marked the debut of fan favorite Kitty Pryde. And this arc helped cement the status of Wolverine as a seriously kick-ass one-man army. The storyline has had a huge influence on comics ever since. The superhero turned bait is a familiar theme, but feels fresh here. It was also a big deal at the time, killing off one of the original X-Men and breaking up one of comics' most iconic couples, and the influence of it is still felt in X-Men titles today, 32 years later. Captain America: Winter Soldier. Bucky Barnes was one of the few comic book characters who died and stayed dead. For the best part of 40 years, his demise was both the tragic origin story of Captain America and the greatest failure in his career. To bring him back would have been akin to resurrecting Spider-Man's Uncle Ben and Gwen Stacy in back-to-back issues. Or having Bruce Wayne's parents return and revive Jason Todd in the same story. Folly. A silly story that would critically undermine Captain America. I knew that if you were going to take away Cap's biggest tragedy, you had to replace it with another huge tragedy or he would lose that marble for you to play, said writer Ed Brubaker about the making of Winter Soldier, and so he set about crafting one of the best stories of reinvention and revival the comic book world has ever seen. No more was Bucky the fresh-faced kid sidekick of the War Hero comics, but instead one of the most dangerous US assets during the Second World War. Yes, he was a teen when he fought, but that was only because he was probably the best hand-to-hand combatant in the world at the time. He was too good a soldier to not be in the fray. Thanks to the excellent Marvel film bearing the same name, the cat is now out of the bag regarding the identity of the Winter Soldier, but such is the craft of Brubaker's tale that this 14-issue story only gains drama when you read it with knowledge of the twist. This isn't the story of how Bucky came back to life, it's the story of why his return is so important to Steve Rogers, to Sharon Carter, to the Falcon, and to the world at large. Not only did Winter Soldier pull off the impossible in reviving Bucky, it also laid the groundwork for some of Marvel's most important stories of the decade. Comics are undoubtedly better for Bucky's return. Superman. Jeff Loeb's nostalgia-swaddled exploration of the man behind the super is a gently refreshing reinvigoration of Smallville's favorite export. A character piece told across 4 seasons, Clark Kent's journey from farm boy to day-saving superhero is recounted by those whose lives his mere existence has affected deeply: Pa Kent, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, and Lana Lang. Originally told in 4 separate issues, 1 per season, it presents the Man of Steel from very distinct viewpoints, as son, savior, adversary, and sweetheart. A story that's light on action but strong on introspection. It starts, naturally enough, in the apple pie Americana of Smallville. A rural idyll of wicker fences, freshly plowed fields and humble folks, it's rendered beautifully as the perfect unassuming homestead. Through Jonathan Kent's fatherly narration, we're invited to see Clark's formative years as not only a son but school friend, townsperson, and yes, alien. We are reminded throughout that Clark is the perennial outsider, and despite the pangs of self-doubt, his isolation is what drives his desire to be the inspirational hero to, and protector of, mankind. Recalling past incarnations, and with an exaggerated beefiness, Superman has rarely looked as powerful as he is awkward, contrasting effectively with the scrawny frailty of his parents or the ugly brutishness of Lex Luthor. With Tim Sale's Norman Rockwell-inspired artwork and John Hanson's elegant watercolors adding a touch of understated class, the book boasts a sumptuous, luxurious quality to every page. In 1998, keeping up with the comic's knotted continuity entanglements following the character's death wasn't easy. Even his wider pop culture reputation was in disarray. The movie series had crashed with the dismal quest for peace, the Tim Burton reboot failed to happen, and the Lois and Clark TV series had been unceremoniously canned. Superman for All Seasons washes away that distaste with a palate-cleansing affirmation of the Man of Steel's legacy. While nods throughout acknowledge the series' heritage, it's the humane charm which sells Loeb and Sale's origin story as uniquely super. V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta was born in the early 1980s very much as a response to Thatcherism. Nevertheless, it has barely dated, and its message, government is not to be trusted and the populace must learn to shake off its chains, through insurrection if need be, remains bracingly, if chillingly, perennial. The strip first appeared in British anthology magazine Warrior, which during its short but memorable lifespan helped midwife the careers of many who became giants of the comics scene, among them Grant Morrison, Steve Dillon, Alan Davis and Alan Moore. When Warrior died, V for Vendetta remained unfinished. DC stepped in, reprinting the existing parts of the story and enabling Moore and artist David Lloyd to complete the rest, 7 years after they had begun. The stark black and white art of the original was given added coloring in the form of subdued pastel washes. The result, looking rather like a series of old tinted photographs, is weirdly effective. The setting is the then near future of 1997. The UK has become a police state after a global nuclear war. Our protagonist, Ivy, is a teenage girl forced to turn to prostitution in order to get by. She is rescued from secret police officers, and would-be rapists, by a cloaked figure wearing a Guy Fawkes mask. The Sandman. Neil Gaiman's popular, acclaimed Sandman series centers on the endless, 7 immortal siblings more powerful than gods: dream, desire, despair, delirium, destiny, destruction and death, who like any family have their feuds and internal alliances, their golden boys and their black sheep. Dream, the Sandman of the title, is also known as Morpheus among many other names, and is a self-absorbed, brooding soul, prone to melancholy and peak but basically benevolent. He drifts languorously through life, seeming both protagonist and spectator, a character as hard to pin down as his namesake yet sympathetic all the same. The series traces his efforts to overcome his pride and atone for past mistakes and transgressions, moving inexorably towards a doomy conclusion. The story arcs fall into 2 distinct categories: short story collections such as Dream Country and Fables and Reflections, and longer single tales such as The Doll's House and Season of Mists. The series highlight, World's End, is both of these at once. Mimicking the episodic structure of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, Gaiman assembles a group of disparate travelers in what purports to be a quaint, Tudor period inn. They have been driven to seek shelter there from a reality storm that is assailing every dimension, and to pass the time they drink and tell stories, either about themselves or about people they've met. Almost all of the tales feature an appearance by Morpheus, which is apt. He is not only Lord of Dreams, but in the episode titled The Golden Boy he dubs himself Prince of Stories. The line dividing dream from imagination is, after all, vanishingly thin. Daredevil. The Man Without Fear. Miller and Romiter's minimalist approach bears this revision of DD's origin story down to the bone. This is a grounded, real, tough place, a world of blood, gin, sweat and desperation. Working-class heroes like Matt's father Jack Murdock are crushed by the criminal forces that control them, and even Matt's superhero name is bitterly ironic. We follow Matt Murdock as he grows from an idealistic kid, through his first stumbling attempts to thwart crime, to his eventual entanglement with Wilson Fisk and first meetings with Elektra. That's a lot to pack into a mere 5 issues, but it flows beautifully thanks to Miller's approach, mostly caption-led, with dialogue only when necessary, aiding the sense that these characters are closed off and alone. It hones in only on the key moments in Matt's journey from Damage to Daredevil. It is, of course, wincingly violent. Jack Murdock is pretty much defined by his bruises, and Romiter lets you feel every blow from Daredevil's weapons, here usually a cane or a baseball bat. It is early days. The creators don't shy away from the moral ambiguity inherent in vigilantism, either. A pivotal moment for Matt is when his actions lead directly to the death of a woman who, yes, was tied up with the villains but didn't deserve this. There are moments of hope and beauty too, not least because of Romiter's wonderfully dynamic, always moving art and Al Williamson's shadowy inks. A stunning splash page renders Matt framed upside down against a full moon, before we realize he is bounding through the city, on the way to his fateful first meeting with Elektra. Jr. foregrounds the joy in Murdock's return to life after years of despair as much as he does the gritty violence. While it's a stretch to say the recent Netflix series is an adaptation of The Man Without Fear, the book is clearly a strong influence. But more important was the book's impact in general. Miller and Romiter's masterpiece proved popular enough to bring Daredevil back from the brink of cancellation and solidified much of the character's mythology in the public mind. Gritty but not unrelenting, bleak but beautiful, it's an essential part of the Daredevil canon and some of Miller and Jr.'s finest work, and that's saying something.